Hi, I'm Rick Hafele. Thanks for joining me for the video portion on the Hooked newsletter with myself, Dave Hughes, and Skip Morris. In this little video segment, I'm going to tie the saddle case Caddis Pupa that we talked about in the newsletter in the current issue, the February-March issue. It's a great pattern for Caddis Pupa in general, but works, I think, very well for this little small saddle case caddis. Here's one in the vise. It's already tied. It just takes four materials, really. Some dubbing for the body. I use a little fine wire for the rib. It's got a little black bead head, and then some CDC for the thorax and wing case. So let's go ahead and get started in tying that fly. It's a simple fly to tie. I think you'll enjoy it. Okay, we're ready to get going. Let me put in the hook first. And for this fly, I'm using a Tiemco 2487. It's a scud type hook. So it's got a little bend to it. It's a short shank hook with a little bend. I've already got the black bead head on there. And I like to use the short shank hook because you're tying this in a very small size. You can use a slightly one size larger hook and get the same size, so you get the same size gap, but you got a short shank, so it's a small body, which is what you're after. This is a size 14, which is much larger than I would normally tie this. Normally it's going to be a 16 or an 18, but I'm using a 14 just so it's a little easier to see. We're going to start putting the thread on. Get it going there right behind the bead head, and I'm just going to wrap back about to the point of the hook, and now I'm going to tie in the little fine wire rib. So I just got a little fine wire here. Tie that in right there where the thread stopped, and I'm going to wrap this down down the bend a little bit, down the bend, because I want the body to start on that curved section of the bend, a little bit past where the barb would be on the hook. So now I'm ready to put in the dubbing, and for this I'm using a sort of a dirty yellow. It's called olive yellow dubbing, and I'm just gonna peel out a little bit here, get that on there. It's easy to use more dubbing than you need. That's always an issue. I want to put a little wax on, just some beeswax here. Just help it stick a bit. And get that started on the thread. There we go. Got the dubbing on there nicely. Like I said, it's easy to get more dubbing than you need, but this body isn't terribly skinny on these little Caddis Pupa, so you can use enough dubbing to build the body up so it looks relatively healthy, I guess you could say. And I'm just going to wrap that up the hook 2/3 the way up, add a little bit of bulk there at the front. There we go. I like the looks of that. Now I'm going to just put in a couple little half hitches, hold that thread in place, because I'm going to use the rotary vise for wrapping the ribbing. And with the bead head on there, if you don't lock the thread in, it'll unravel when you use the rotary vise. Without the bead head, you don't have to worry about this. But anyway, I've got the little thread locked in place. Now I'm going to use the rotary vise to wrap the ribbing forward, watching not to cut the ribbing on the hook point. And I'm just giving it what looks like some even segmentation as I go forward all the way up. And I can tie off the rib, a couple of turns of thread, and then just wiggle that fine wire till it breaks. That's the easiest way to get it off. With heavy wire you'd have to cut it, but the fine wire breaks easy. Now the next step is I'm going to use a dubbing loop tool. I'm going to make a dubbing loop to tie in CDC fibers. So just a couple inches long, and I wrap up to the front over the base of that thread that locks in a loop. There we go. Now I'm going to Put in a couple of half hitches again because I'm going to use the rotary vise once more. Now the dubbing loop is going to be used to lock in the fibers of the CDC so we can make a little hackle out of CDC fibers. So I've got two CDC fibers, back to back, and I'm going to put half of those, one half of that side inside the loop. So I'm just capturing the fibers in the loop. Yeah, didn't quite get it that time. It's always a little tricky. You spread the loop apart with your fingers, slide them in. If everything goes well, when you close it, you've got them. I'm just going to make a couple of turns so I don't lose those fibers when I start cutting here. There we go. Now I can do that. Now I'm just going to cut these off. Base, might give it a couple more turns here just to make sure I don't lose any fibers. There we go. Now you can see I've got a nice loose bit of CDC fibers sticking out of that loop, and they're locked in place. So now I'm just going to wrap that on, and this is going to make the legs, the pupil shuck, the wing case, and the thorax all at one time. And as I wrap it, I'm going to stroke these back so they aren't wrapped over each other and they all kind of face to the back towards the rear of the hook, bend of the hook. I'm going to use all of this material like so. That turned out pretty nice. And it seems like using those two feathers back to back, and you're using just one side of those feathers, but it seems to provide enough CDC for a nice wing case, thorax area. Don't really need more than that. Okay, now I can cut off that dubbing loop. Got a little more here to cut off. There we go. Now let's take a couple more wraps. Now I can put a whip finish on there and we're done. So you can see this is a very easy fly to tie, and you can tie this in different sizes and colors for different Caddis Pupa. I really like CDC for this type of approach. It wiggles in the water and has a lot of lifelike action, and it traps bubbles of air too. So that's all three characteristics you want. Now the last step here is I'm just going to trim. I want really the longest fibers on the bottom. I'm going to pull a few of those down, and I'm going to trim the top here a little bit, like so. And if some of these are a little too long, you can trim them up a bit. There's a few that are a little too long, but you know, really you're not looking for something super neat here because you want it to wiggle, you want it to look alive in the water, so the longer fibers give it nice action. So you don't need to be you don't want to over trim it. So there you have the fly. So give this fly a try. I think you'll enjoy it. It fishes well, and I appreciate you coming and checking out how to tie this one. Check out Hook newsletter, hooknow.com. Thanks a lot.